Okay, so I've just finished playing Amnesia: The Bunker, which is Frictional Games' newest Amnesia game. It's a long-running series. I think this is the fourth one, right? So you had Dark Descent, you had Machine for Pigs, Rebirth, and now you've got The Bunker. Now, I only ever played Dark Descent way back in the day, can barely remember it. I remember it being terrifying. And I still enjoyed it nonetheless. Maybe I should go back to it. I've heard mixed things on Machine for Pigs and Rebirth. Both of them sort of scoring knocks against them. But this game, I can tell you right now, The Bunker, this is brilliant. It's really good. They also did Soma, which in a way they're probably more well known for. Had a bit of an existential, the soul and robots and sort of narrative that resonated with a lot of people. A sci-fi under the sea sort of affair. For whatever reason, they've stuck with the Amnesia series. That's how it starts. So you're in a World War I bunker. You play as a Frenchman, but we try not to hold that against you too much. There's been some sort of kerfuffle at the beginning. You've fallen into a crater, or your friend's fallen into a crater. You've rescued him. Coming back from the front lines, you know, you've been attacked by the Germans, knocked unconscious, and then you wake up in a sort of 28 days later-esque, I've been in a coma, I've woken up, it's after the fall setting, so where is everyone, what's happened, I need to figure out what's going on. That's the setup. So you're in this bunker, and you're the only one in there, and you don't know what's happened, and so you figure it out as you explore around by picking up all these little sort of log entries from the different soldiers, and it's actually really interesting. It's a grounded story. It's not trying to teach you some lesson in life or browbeat you with an ideology or anything like that. It's just some poor bastard soldiers stuck in a friggin' bunker in World War I, plotting the days leading up to where you find yourself and the disaster around that from the different perspectives of the soldiers and the officers, and it goes into their interplay and conflict amongst them a bit, but it's not high literature or anything like that. It's what you would want from a horror story with an ensemble cast.
But when he returns and I remind him of the time he pissed in my flask, or the mysterious lice that appeared in my bunk, or the incident with that barmaid, well, I laughed in those cases, and he'll laugh in this one.
So what makes this game tick? The moving parts of this game could probably be best described under three different pillars. There would be the physics and environment system, I would call it. There's the survival horror mechanics or components, and then there's the monster itself and all the gameplay that surrounds him. So let's go through them one at a time. So physics and environment. So what am I talking about there? The game has like a great example, and I think it's been in since at least, I know it was in the first Amnesia, where, you know, if you want to open a door, you have to hold down mouse and push in or out, or if you want to turn a valve, it's sort of cumbersome, it's sort of clunky, but it's intentional because you're under the pump, you're under pressure, you're stressed, sort of emulating, you know, the horror scene trope you see in a B-grade slasher schlock thing where dude's trying to pick the right key and keeps dropping it or putting the wrong thing in the lock while the monster's breathing down your neck. A great little example is like there's these overhead cupboards that you'll come across, and they have an old school little hook latch over the top. So you have to click it on the latch, you have to go up and around to unlock it, and then you have to click on the door and pull it, sort of swing it out. So it's not cumbersome in a frustrating way. I think it's actually value add, and it's worth mentioning. And then this plays into a lot of the environmental objects that you interact with as well, right? So there's a lot of barrels and crates you can move around. There's a little bit of platforming where you might have to climb on things, and dragging this crap around makes a lot of noise, which obviously can put you in strife because there's a stealth component to the monster, and so you're trying to not be noisy if you can help it. But things like a door might be locked because it has boards on it, and you have to peel the boards off. You have to sort of wrench them off using that mouse pull system. Other things like if you want to break down a door, you could throw a grenade or something like that if you want. But if you can find something heavy like a cinder block, you can actually pick it up and hold down a button to wind up a throw and belt it into the door. And so you can belt the door a couple of times to smash it, obviously making a lot of noise. A very clever mechanic, right? You want to get through that door, you're going to have to keep hitting it and keep making noise. It's a bit Shawshank belting on the pipes kind of scenario. And then on top of that as well, not to jump ahead, but the monster pops out of these little air vents, these little holes out of the wall, and you can try and clog them up with boxes as well. There's also explosive barrels that'll have like gas, because you can get a gas mask, and then explosives as well. So manipulating the environment, there's tables and things to hide under, and your way will potentially be blocked by shelves that can only be broken to go through. So the monster might break them when he's chasing you, or you could decide to try and interact with them from any of the almost immersive sim-like mechanics mentioned to break through and get through a shortcut through a certain area. So it's actually really clever. It's a very value-add component. So, all right, so that's the first part. The second part is survival horror, which seems unusual. Again, I haven't played the more recent Amnesias, but Amnesia 1 was definitely more of a psychological horror game, right? Any sort of inventory management in that, from what I recall, was fairly limited. This is way more into my ballpark, the Resident Evil sort of stuff. So you start with a very limited inventory, which can be upgraded by little incremental upgrades. It only upgrades one square at a time, so which is really actually interesting. I don't see that in Resident Evil games usually. Usually upgrades like a whole row or something. So you find these little 1 bits at a time. So it's like, it's a lot of work for a little upgrade, but every little bit counts. So the increments feel impactful. Not like a RPG where you get plus 2% elemental resistance, not that sort of increment. The incremental upgrade to your inventory in here is welcome, but also like never fully a relief. At any given time, you're always going to be thinking about what you want to carry, and a huge part of the loop, like any good survival horror, resource management, inventory management game, is the idea that you just need to pick and choose what you can carry. There's like a safe room essentially at the center of the world. It's sort of a central safe hub with a save point, and there is like an inventory chest that you can put your stuff in there. The other thing worth mentioning is the more standard sort of mechanics that you would probably see in another game, another genre, or even other survival horrors. Your combat, your healing is actually pretty unique here as well. So you have a revolver, but bullets are like liquid gold in this, and it has a very, very clunky, methodical reloading. You've got to put each bullet in as well, and it's good. There's a rewarding component to it. One revolver round is just a godsend, and having to use it on a lock or something like that, knowing full well that shooting it is probably going to attract the monster, and now you're down a round to try and scare him off. It's just stressful. The health and healing system is actually really inspired. So you basically hold down your inventory button, you hold down tab, and your dude pads himself down to figure out if you're bleeding or not. And then so you'll see it in screens, he holds his hand up when you're in your inventory. If you're injured and bleeding, there'll be blood on his fingers because he's gone and stuck it in his leg hole, whatever it is. So you obviously want to bandage that up if possible. If you leave the wound untended, the big disadvantage is that you'll leave a blood trail, which gives the monster something to sniff out and hunt. So you need to plug your blood holes as soon as you possibly can. And it's really good. It's not something you see very often. Usually, if you're on 100% health or you're on 50% health, who cares in a video game normally? It's just a metric to risk and how close you are to dying. But in this, as soon as you start bleeding out of your bits and pieces, you want to patch it up. You badly want to patch it up because it starts making the game much more lethal as you leave a blood trail. And then we get on to the sort of last tenet, which is the monster, the specifics of the monster. This monster traverses around the environment, and if you agitate it or draw attention to yourself by making noise, by running around, all that sort of stuff, he'll come after you and he'll kill you. He's invincible. but you can scare it off. It's obviously, it's very much inspired by Alien Isolation, if you don't know. Same sort of thing. You've got an alien stalking you through the vents, and it's a phenomenal game, and there's a reason they've copied something that's fantastic before them. So essentially, this dude will mostly move through the walls, through the vents, through the roof, and you can sort of see all the dust coming down from the walls, apart from the audio cues, but there are a lot of visual cues as well. Sticks his little fingers out of the wall holes now and then, but generally speaking, will stay within the walls under the condition that, one, you don't be a lout making an ass of yourself, and two, you keep the main bunker lights on. And in order to do that, you have to keep fueling the generator. And this is a big part of the gameplay loop. So as you get around, there will be fuel cans that you can find, and you could use them to set them on fire for traps, but that's much more dire panic situations. Their real value is going into the generator to fuel the lights. And you've got a little stopwatch mechanic, which is tick, 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 ticking away, and it's very stressful. It works really well, along with your heartbeat when the monster's around, stressing you out. Just so much of that design philosophy is really clever, and they've really thought about what they're doing. But you sync your clock up with the generator, and you can pull it out while you're on the move, while you're stressing, and you've got this ticking in your ear. You can see maybe you've only got 60 seconds before the lights go out. And then when the bunker lights are out, the monster then gets a bit of Dutch courage. He gets a bit brassed up, and he will come out of the vents and essentially start patrolling around the same corridors as you, which is a big problem. Especially when the way that this game works is generally your safe room is in the center of a wheel, and you're going out onto the spokes, as it were, to all these different areas: maintenance, the prison, the arsenal, the soldiers' quarters. Then you'll be foraying out to those, but then traversing back into the center. That's essentially your line of travel. So if the lights go out and this dude's cruising around the corridors, it's a recipe for head-on conflict. And on that, you can use all sorts of environmental, explosions, grenades, fire, your revolver, to try and scare this creature off. At worst, you're just going to make it angry, and at best, you're just going to scare it off for a little bit, and he'll scarper away, but then he'll be back with a vengeance. So he's a bit of a Terminator. He's unkillable, unstoppable, so you sort of have to just play around his behavior. So what you're ultimately trying to do is, your objective is to blast a way out of the entrance. The entrance has been sealed, and I won't go into the narrative, but the entrance has been sealed and you're trapped and you want to get out. So you got to go and get all the MacGuffins from the different sectors, the different spokes on the wheel, and bring them back and put it all together to escape. That's your main objective. However, it's never straightforward. The game actually sort of just lets you off the leash. There's a map system on the walls, but never a handy map, so you do have to memorize what you're doing. And when the lights go out and you're down to one bullet and the monster, you can hear it looking for you, and it's pitch black and you can't start your friggin' lamp because it's going to make noise. Which way was I going? Was it left? Was it right? It's just the right amount of stress. But you'll go down to a section and you'll inevitably get blocked by a locked door or some sort of environmental issue, and then you'll have to go down one of the other spokes to progress in that direction and potentially get the quest item to take back to the other sector to get through. Handled poorly, this could be tedious and mind-numbing and go get me 10 boar pelts from the forest. But no, this is actually handled expertly. For something it feels like size-wise, it's very stage play, right? It's not a huge 16 times the size AAA empty open world. This is a very small environment. It's kind of intimate. All of the game's design is enhanced by that because you find yourself memorizing the play space, and it's very, very important that you do that so you don't get turned around. When you do get stressed out and 5 things go wrong, you'll be able to unwind yourself and find your way back to home, as it were. One of the core parts of the loop is that you want to get into all the soldiers' lockers, which are all combination locked, and they'll have resources but also mission critical items in there. And in order to do that, you have to find their bodies and inspect their dog tags, and on the back of the dog tag will have the combination for the lock. Funnily enough though, that combination is shuffled whenever you play. In fact, it's shuffled whenever you reload, so you can't cheat your way out of it. Can't run down a corridor and find old mate's thing, reload the save, then go and try and unlock the locker. It won't work. It reshuffles it. So it's great. It's a great way to stop save scumming and circumvent that sort of behavior. But yeah, ultimately, this game's brilliant. It's one of the better horror games, but I think it sits actually in a really good, on the edge of survival horror and closer and to the more psychological horror. It's brilliant. It's a great game, and from what I understand, it's probably a turn in the right direction for the Amnesia series and how it's previously been. So the hope is that this performs well, that it maybe informs the next Amnesia game, and hopefully it inspires indie and AA publishers to take a leaf out of its book to take a smaller bite of the pie, but really just be brilliant at the basics. Just really nail your gameplay. It never outstays its welcome. I think this is actually brilliant.